So, Apple has just announced the new 2022 iPad Pro via a press release, and here are not 5, not 10, but 18 things you probably didn't know about this iPad Pro. Some good, some bad, mostly bad. So let's begin. Number 1, this new iPad Pro can now shoot ProRes video, just like on the iPhone. And just like on the iPhone, it is restricted to 4K 30. But the good news here is that since the iPad Pro has a Thunderbolt port, you will be able to transfer that footage to your MacBook much faster than on the iPhone, which only has a USB 2.0 Lightning port. However, number 2, ProRes does have some limitations. More specifically, if you buy the baseline 128GB model of the iPad Pro, just like with the iPhones, it will be limited to 1080p 30. Number 3, let's talk about the camera hardware. So the camera hardware has remained unchanged, and a fun fact, the main camera has the same sensor specs as the iPhone Xs. So that means an f1.8 aperture, a 1/3 inches sensor size. So yeah, the camera is just okay. I mean, I guess it's good for an iPad Pro, but in general, it's just fine. The reason why I'm mentioning this is that if you now want to shoot in ProRes and then edit on the iPad as well, the quality of the footage would simply not compare to something like an iPhone 13 or an iPhone 14. And not only that, but the ultra-wide camera is also worse than what the iPhone 11 had, the first iPhone with an ultra-wide module. So on the iPad Pro, we have a 10 megapixel sensor compared to the 12 on the iPhone 11s. But something that has been improved is the camera processing. More specifically, the HDR processing has been bumped from Smart HDR3 to Smart HDR4. This is basically the same upgrade as we got from the iPhone 12's processing to the iPhone 13's with Smart HDR4. And the improvements were nice, but again, they weren't that massive. So if you plan on shooting with this camera alone, it's fine, but don't expect any outstanding results like you could get from a modern iPhone. Now, something else that's new, more positives, I guess, would be the ProRes media engines. More specifically, we have a ProRes RAW encode and a ProRes decode engine. So if you use your iPad to shoot ProRes, or you simply transfer ProRes from your camera to the iPad Pro and then you want to do some simple edits, you're going to get much better performance with ProRes footage. More specifically, Apple says that the transcoding speeds are 3 times faster than on the M1 iPad Pro model. Now, aside from the media engines, another improvement of the new M2 chip is faster CPU performance by 15%, faster GPU performance by 35%, and more memory bandwidth by up to 50%. However, what you need to know here is that these are just numbers that Apple claims. In real-world usage, honestly, you won't be able to tell any difference from the M1 to the M2. Like, I'm still using the 2018 iPad Pro with the Apple A12X chip, and that is still fast enough for my needs. Like, we even did a speed test on the M1 iPad Pro compared to the A12Z, the 2020 model, which is the same as the 2018 with just 1 extra GPU core. And long story short, the actual performance differences and the real-world usage wasn't that much different. Now, I do have a couple of more good news here. So the DaVinci Resolve is actually coming to the iPad Pro. However, at the moment, it is unclear if this is only for the M2 model or the M1 as well, likely the M1 as well. But yeah, this is the first time we've ever had a professional video editing suite on the iPad. And if you take a look at the layout, it looks very similar to how it looks on the desktop, so that is great. If you ever wanted to use your iPad exclusively for video editing, now's your chance, as this is even better than the previous champ, Lumia Fusion. Not only that, but Octane X is coming too. So this is a rendering tool. I guess it's nice to have on the iPad as well. Like, if you're a 3D rendering artist, you most likely already have a very powerful desktop PC at home. So I guess the iPad could then be used for you to take on the road and render some very simple small projects. And also some good news, Stage Manager, which used to be unique to the M1 iPads, like, you couldn't really use it on older models, as Apple claimed that it was impossible due to the hardware limitations of the non-M1 chips. And yeah, a lot of people complain about that, and guess what? The latest iPadOS 16 beta actually enables Stage Manager on the older iPads, which means that you no longer need an M1 or an M2 model for a Stage Manager. The only thing that you'll be missing out on is external monitor support with Stage Manager, which will still be limited to just the M1 and the M2 models. And I guess the last good feature would be the pencil hover. So this is something that's exclusive to the M2 iPad Pros, and it kind of works in a very similar way to how it does on the Galaxy Note phones, where you simply hold the pencil above the screen and it would detect the cursor even when you're not touching the display, and give you some extra features like being able to see the brush size and then adjust it without even tapping on the screen. That's quite nice, bit of a gimmick, but you know, maybe useful for some people. By the way, this is a software feature, not hardware. There's no new tech inside these new iPad Pros, so this is purely a software feature that has been restricted to just the M2 iPad Pros. And now on to the negatives, with one of the biggest ones being the Wi-Fi 6E catch. Wi-Fi 6E normally adds a 6 GHz band, and then it also significantly increases the number of channels. So we have 8 channels in total, 1 for 5 GHz and then 7 for 6 GHz. However, if you go on Apple's spec page, there's actually no mention at all of any 6 GHz band. They only mention 2.4 GHz and then 5 GHz. Now, the speeds have indeed been doubled, so it is very likely that it does indeed have that band, but it is a bit confusing from the spec page because it doesn't really tell you that it has it. So maybe it is a typo, that's my guess here, because the speeds have indeed been doubled. Also, we now have fewer cellular bands than on the previous model, so GSM and Edge have been dropped entirely, which means that if you use your iPad with cellular in a place where you have low signal, before you would get Edge, but now you would have no signal at all. Now, the Bluetooth standard has indeed been upgraded from 5.0 to 5.3, which is a pretty nice upgrade. So 5.0 was originally introduced in 2016, 6 years ago, whereas 5.3 would be from 2021. So that's the newest Bluetooth standard. And this allows for faster device switching, you get more bandwidth, and you also get a much lower power consumption. Now, one major disappointment is when it comes to the Magic Keyboard, as it still does not have any function keys. And the weird thing here is that Apple did release a new Magic Keyboard for the 10th gen redesigned iPad, which, guess what, does actually have function keys. So everything on this keyboard is the same as with the old one, aside from the price, which has now been increased outside of the US. So in the UK, it used to cost £279, but now it costs $329. Now, the next thing that you need to be aware of is when it comes to the display. So we have had some recent rumors saying that the iPad will be updated to OLED in 2024, which means that until then, the base 11-inch iPad Pro will stick with an LCD display, which is very, very disappointing. At least Apple should have given it a mini LED panel. I think LCD on an $800 tablet is ridiculous. But what's even more ridiculous is that this $800 price is only in the US. So outside of the US, pretty much everywhere, the price has been increased. In the UK, for example, it used to cost £749, very expensive, but now it is £900, so £150 more for essentially the same iPad. Not only that, but as I mentioned before, the Magic Keyboard is also more expensive, and the Apple Pencil is now also more expensive, from £119 to $139. But let's say that money isn't an issue, and you're honestly considering getting this new M2 iPad Pro. How would it compare price-wise to something like, you know, the newest M2 MacBook Air? Well, let's take the base 11-inch iPad Pro, bump the storage to 256 to match the MacBook Air, add a Magic Keyboard, and the total would be £1,338, compared to $1,249 on the MacBook Air. So that is a bit more expensive, but keep in mind, that is only the 11-inch iPad Pro. If you bump it to the 12.9, it would cost you £1,748. That is £500 more than the M2 MacBook Air and almost in the 14-inch MacBook Pro's price territory. I think what you really need to be aware of is that the refurbished prices from the Apple Store have actually been dropped. So you can get an 11-inch iPad Pro refurbished for £409 or $469, which is a major discount compared to the new models. Now, that is indeed the 2018 model with the Apple A12X chip, but you need to remember that afterwards, the 2020 model only had the A12Z, which had one extra GPU core, so performance-wise, those two were very similar. So 2018 and 2020 are basically the same. The 2021, the M1 was indeed much more powerful, but in terms of day-to-day use, I'm still using the 2018, like I said, and it feels very fast, so I wouldn't be upgrading anytime soon. If you really want to look for an M1 model or the 2020 A12Z, for some reason. You can also look on Amazon for a refurbished iPad. They have some great prices too, links in the description. Overall, I'm just very disappointed with this new iPad Pro. It has the same design as the 2018, 2020, 2021 model. So that's unchanged. The camera is still in the same vertical orientation despite the 10th gen iPad relocating that to landscape mode, which is better for when using the keyboard. And everything is more expensive. And the thing is, you don't need the M2 chip. Like, that's such an overkill. The M1 was already an overkill, and the M2 is even more so. But yeah, do let me know what do you guys think about this new iPad Pro, and also check out our latest video on all the other iPads. I'm also talking about the entry-level 10th gen iPad here, and the iPad mini and all of the other ones too. So do check that out. I'm Daniel, this has been ZONEofTECH, and I'll see you guys in the next one. ZONEofTECH, signing out. Cheers.